Yeah, so I really want to talk about the meaning of the birth of a Buddha. But first, just to make people aware, there is an historical Buddha. And how do we know that there is an historical Buddha that was a living person? And most of the stories, well, there are many stories and legends about him. The basic facts of his life are well known and documented. Because several hundred years after the passing of the Buddha, there was a great emperor, Ashoka. He was the emperor of the Mauryan Empire, which is a great warrior empire, as unfortunately most empires are. And he was a great warrior king, and he made a great war against the Kalingas, another kingdom. And when he was doing his victory, kings and emperors, I'd like to do their victory marches, right? To see what their conquest has brought. And when he saw the death, the destruction that his great victory had inflicted, like actually saw it, his heart was so devastated by knowing that he had done that in the name of victory. He changed. It's not quite known whether he had been a Buddhist or he converted at that point, but anyhow, he transformed himself in that moment, and for the rest of his life, he really devoted himself to being the most noblest type of king, only devoted to the welfare of his people. Emperors of today could learn from him, couldn't they? But one of the things he did, which brings me to the historical Buddha, he went around and he erected these pillars all over India. And some of the pillars where he wrote down his edicts, which are wonderful to read for the benefit of his kingdom, but also at every place associated with the Buddha's life, he erected these pillars that commemorated, here is where the Buddha was born, and here where the Buddha left home, and here is where the Buddha came to enlightenment, and here is where the Buddha passed. Because all these places were still, hadn't happened that many hundred years ago that people didn't know. So these pillars were erected by him, and then, this is 2,600 years, or 2,200 years ago, and over time, they were not known, right? And then during the days in the 1800s with the Royal Archaeological Society in England, in India, Royal India, they had heard about the Buddha. It's very interesting. Buddhism was all over, Asia, right? China, Japan, South, all these countries have become, India had once been Buddhist, but there was hardly a trace of Buddhism left in all of India and, Nepal. And yet, everywhere else in the world, there were all these stories that the Buddha was born in Bodh Gaya and he was born in Lumbini. But in India and Nepal, there was no trace of it. So the British Archaeological Society undertook these archaeological surveys and digs, putting things together where the legends had them. And lo and behold, guess what? They found these pillars. And not only did they find these pillars, but they found the ruins of all kinds of temples and monasteries, showing that at one point, Buddhism had been a great force in Indian life. And actually, I'm sure you Nepalis know this, but for many years there was controversy between India and Nepal because the northern India, southern Nepal, the Terai, it's sort of disputed area. Anyhow, they used to have a dispute. Where was the Buddha? The Indians claimed they had a town on their side of the border where he was born, and the Nepalis had Lumbini, and then they found the pillar. I forget what year they found the pillar in Lumbini. So therefore we know that the Buddha was an historical person, and he was born in Lumbini, and Yeah, so what do we know about the Buddha? We know that he was born into a noble family. You know, oftentimes we hear his father, King Suddhata, and Queen Maya was a king. And we think like King of England, you know, or King of France. It wasn't like that. These were small principalities. And there were larger kind of kingdoms, but the Shakya one was not that. Okay? But yet, his father, King Suddhadana, was sort of like the head man of his clan, the Shakyas, and therefore he had authority within that community. Like many kings, he wanted an heir, right? And in those days, your daughter could not be your heir. Things have changed, hopefully. So he wanted a son. And his wife had not given him a son. So they prayed and prayed. And then eventually, and there's a kind of a legend of what happened, but she became pregnant, Queen Maya. And it was traditional in those days for a woman to return to her parents' home to give birth. So she was on her way to her parents' home when she came near the Lumbini gardens, where she stopped and where she gave birth. Now, according to the legend, when the Buddha appeared, he was fully formed. Okay? And he was fully formed, and he was able to walk, and he was able to speak. And when he walked, he took 7 steps in each direction, and in each of his steps, a lotus bloomed. A special being, we might say. And then if people can see this baby Buddha statue, which is very traditional and always brought out on this day, he pointed up and he pointed down and he said, above the heavens and below the heavens and below the earth, I am the only one. Now, that could be mistaken to be the most arrogant statement that anyone has ever heard. But his I was not the I of self, was not the I of ego. This was pointing to our true nature, our Buddha nature. Right? You know, it is higher than the heavens, it is deeper than the earth, it is everywhere. And now he clearly came from that unconditional, absolute place of realization in that moment of statement. He also supposedly said, and this is going to be my last birth. I am not going to take rebirth. So after this miraculous birth, he then became a normal boy again. I don't know what quite happened, but he kind of, it's quite interesting. So let's talk about a baby. Right? We were all babies, weren't we? I don't know if we can remember being babies. Perhaps we've been around babies. But what do we know about babies and their minds? Uncontaminated. No thought, no language. Right? And yet, if you've been in the presence of a baby, you know what? Aware. Present. Right? And they look at you. Just a newborn baby or young baby, look at you. You know there's some powerful knowing there, right? But it's uncontaminated. It's pure. It has not been contaminated by culture, by learning, by education, by anything. Right? It's interesting that some people said it happened when she first had this dream. She had had a dream that she was that a white elephant had penetrated her, and that was sort of the miraculous birth that was interpreted as she was pregnant. Some people said it happened afterwards, but we know that is very common. A soothsayer, somebody who read the charts, was brought in either before or after, and they were told, your son is going to be a great being. If he goes the worldly way, he will be a great empire builder. He will be a great king. But he may go another way. He may renounce the world. He may renounce all the accomplishments and the fame and the glory that the world is going to offer him, and he may become a renunciate, and he may become a great spiritual light in this world. Right? No, I think that's very interesting. Right? Even though it's sort of extreme, like you're either going to be a great master of the world, or you're either going to be a master of spirituality and the Dharma, sort of. But I think it shows choice. That all of us and all children, us, children, our children, are born pure, undefiled, unconditioned. And it is the world that conditions them and how they respond to their conditioning that human beings go this way and that way in their life. King Suddhodana, when he heard this prophecy, he was not happy because he wanted his son to follow him. He wanted an heir. So he very deliberately undertook to create a bubble around, his name was Siddhartha, to create a bubble around him because he wanted him only to be the king. So he gave them a life of pleasure, a life of, doing all the things, the education, the pleasure, the sports, that were all in training for the king. And if there's one thing that he tried to do, was to keep him away from the reality of the world. Because in the reality of the world, his son would have seen what? That it's not all fun and games. It's not all fun and games out there. It's not all one success after another. Right? He didn't want him to see that there was sickness, that there was aging, that there was death, that there was all these other things in life, because he didn't want anything to disturb his son's training for the worldly life. And it's very interesting, it is said in the kind of legendary accounts of the Buddha, who's not the Buddha now, he was just Siddhartha, that in traditional Buddhist culture, Asian culture, people believed in many, many lives, right? Not just one life. And so there is a whole body of literature called the Jatakas, which are all these stories. I don't know if anybody's familiar with them. They're all these stories of the past lives of the Buddha. And in many of them, he has human form, and in many of them, he is an animal. And all of the stories, well, they're all stories, they have one theme. And that theme is all those previous lifetimes, that human, that animal sacrificed themselves for the benefit of someone else. Actually, people from Nepal, there's a place outside of Kathmandu called Namo Buddha. I don't know if people have been there. But Namo Buddha is supposedly the place where the Buddha, in a previous lifetime, he was a young prince. And he was out hunting, young princes go out and hunt. And he came across a starving tigress. She was starving. And around her were her pups, mewing because they wanted milk. And she had no milk because she had been too weak to hunt. So there he was, a prince, a hunter. And yet when he saw this, the sadness of this situation with this mother tiger unable to feed her pups, and the suffering of her and the pups, he was so moved to compassion that he saw above her was a cliff. And so he went up to the top of the cliff. He jumped off. He landed right by her so she could partake of him, and she was able to feed her babies and gather strength. So that's an example of these, lots of stories like this. And yet, even if you think that somebody has all these past energies and lifetimes, if you believe in that they're bringing with them into this lifetime. And I think all of us can, if we look at our life, can look at sort of what it's like to be us as an individual, as a child, as a young adult, as an adult. And even though we can be very aware of our family and the way we were raised and the way people were in the family and all the things and schoolmates, and we might be aware that there was something in us that somehow seemed to be us. Do you know what I'm saying? There could be something unique in us, or a calling or an intuition, that when we look around our family and stuff, we don't see it there. You know what I mean? It's not like genetics. It's almost like there's something in us, right? Like a different kind of calling or a different kind of sensibility that may not necessarily we can see, nature versus nurture. It's all that kind of like that. But there's something unique in us. And, but it has to be nurtured for it to grow. So, Suddhodana was very clear. He did not want any type of spiritual, religious, any kind of, he didn't mind the the Vedic rituals, but I mean any kind of spirituality or really touching the human suffering that may touch those seeds within him. He didn't want those nurtured at all, so he kept them apart, right? It's interesting in the story of the Buddha, when you think about it, like, comes out fully formed, right? Talks profound things about, everything is just absolute nature, And then he becomes a boy. You might think, well, why didn't he just continue on, right? He could have been the God King, right? I mean, you know what I mean? There are young kids that appear in different cultures where they announce that they are the Buddha, they are the God King, Why didn't he do that? It was always a puzzlement to me. Like, what happened? Right? And then I was reflecting on this last night. Because I don't think I'd ever thought about it. Even though I've known this story for 50 years, I never thought, they don't talk about what happened. You know what I mean? It's like he's a fully formed, awakened newborn. And then he's just a boy in the palace, growing up, doing this and that, playing archery, and you know what I'm saying? Like, what's that about? And when I reflected on it and thought about the teachings, this is the path in the Buddhist tradition that enlightened beings take. They enter the world. They don't remove themselves from the world, right? So, even though we might say the Buddha came into this world already fully enlightened, even though we say the Buddha came into the world with all this, spiritual work of sacrifice, altruism, still in this lifetime, he had to go through the journey of being a human being. Right? So he could understand us. There are many great spiritual lights in this world, and maybe you've read some of them or met some of them, but they're always teaching from here. Do you know what I'm saying? Because a lot of them don't have the human experience of being a real human being. Right. But the Buddha needed that experience because his journey was to teach us skillfully and appropriately for where we were at. And how do you know where we're at? Well, you have to know people, and you have to know their life, and you have to know what they're dealing with, so you can really help them, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, there are many people, they write books. They give great advice. They give great spiritual teachings. But how to apply that teaching specifically to me or my situation it takes another kind of intelligence, another kind of wisdom. In Buddhism, it's called discernment, discriminatory wisdom. It's not absolute wisdom. It's a different kind of intelligence. It's an intelligence that understands people where they're at. Yeah, so the Buddha had to go through this journey. Right? That even though he came into this world fully enlightened, even though according to that he came into this world having spent many, many lifetimes just cultivating this altruistic heart. Still, in this life, he had to go through it all again. right? He had to go through the worldly phase, right? The worldly phase for him was based on what? The good life. The good life. Having lots of fun, having lots of activities, having lots of friends, doing what he wanted to do, right? Getting married, having a child, being prepared by his father to be the king, right? He had to go through all this, and you know what? Like many of us, he totally bought into it, right? He totally bought into that achieving worldly success is the way to happiness. Okay? I mean, he was totally there. And then he slipped out of the palace. Right? If he hadn't slipped out of the palace, he probably wouldn't have fulfilled the possibility he had to be a great spiritual light, if he had stayed in the palace, living that life. So we know he slipped out of the palace. He disobeyed his father, right, who would forbid him or the charioteers or the people around him to let him just go out into the town. And so he slipped out, and all of a sudden he looked around and he saw things that he had not seen in the palace, in that life. What did he see?
Pain and suffering.
Yeah, well, he saw a sick person. And he was dumbfounded. What is that? Anybody ever been sick, like with the flu or something? Yeah, how do you look? What? And there's stuff dripping out of your nose, and not the, he had grown up in the palace, everything was beautiful. Right? All of a sudden he saw a sick person, and he said to his charioteer Chandra, like, what is that? Who are those people? And Chandra said, those are sick people. And the Buddha said, who are they? And Chandra said, oh, everybody gets sick. It's normal. The Buddha was shocked because he'd always been healthy. He'd always had a healthy body, he'd always had known good health. The idea that somehow he could look like that and that there were lots of other kinds of diseases out there, it really made him, look very disturbingly at his life. It was kind of like a little chink. And then the next one, he goes out and he sees people who are over 60 or 70. Don't take this personally, but he saw old people. Bent over, walking very slowly. Lots of wrinkles. Nothing personal. And again, he was like, what is that? He'd never seen it. And when Chandra told him, oh, that's just an old person, it's like, and the Buddha, Siddhartha was like, do they live in their own village? Where do they come from? And he said, no, that happens to everyone. All bodies get sick and they age. That's normal. That happens to, and again the Buddha said, you mean it's going to happen to me? And Chandra said, yeah, it's going to happen to you. Right? It happens to everyone. It happens to the high and the low, the mighty, the peons. It happens to the wealthy and the poor. Everybody gets sick. Everybody ages. And then, of course, the final thing on his last trip out, or his third trip out, And those of you who've been to, India, Asia, Nepal, I don't know if they still do it, but it used to be that they would carry, right, like the bodies through the street to the charnel grounds. They still do. So it was very public, you know what I mean? It wasn't like a hearse went flying by, and you didn't know what was inside. It was like, yeah, so all of a sudden, he saw this body, and usually you can see the face, right? There are flowers around it, but you can see the face, and like immovable. And then he followed them and saw them take them to the burning ghats. Their bodies are burnt, and that really disturbed him. Like, what is that? That's death. That's the end of life. And when life comes to an end, human beings just burn the bodies. No, the Buddha was totally centered on his body. He had this youthful, healthy body, beautiful body, right? He loved his body. He identified his body. So not only was it going to get sick, not only was it going to age, but now one day it's going to die and be no more. You see, like everything he had been focusing on that gave his life meaning. And again, it wasn't like this is only going to happen to him. Chandra would also give him the bad news. It's going to happen to everyone. Your beautiful courtesans, it's going to happen to them. They're going to get sick, they're going to old, they're going to die. Your parents, your family, your children, your wife, everybody you know. This is what happens to everyone. They all end up there. The Buddha was, I often think of it like he went into an existential crisis. Like his whole, everything he had been living for. He was a totally worldly person. Everything he had been living for, all of a sudden he saw it had no stability to it. It was all impermanent. Everything, his body, who he was, all his things, his palaces, his beauties, all the people around him, none of it was going to last. All his relationships, none of it was going to last. And it was all kind of temporary, because he'd ask Chandra, so, death only comes when you're very old? And Chandra says, no. Death always will come if you've lived it to your old age. But children die. Adults die. Children get sick. You know what I mean? It was like, no, this is a common human experience. So I think because he was so invested in his worldly life, he sort of like had amnesia about his spiritual, like I think many people do. We often ignore that part of ourselves that beats to another drum. He'd been ignoring that. And all of a sudden, in these very raw experiences, he was just in a state. Maybe I would say he went into a profound depression, in modern terms. And we know he had a depression because they said all of a sudden nothing had any joy to him. He'd go to the parties and the dancing and the music. It was all flat. It was all flat to him. I think he was profoundly depressed. There was no meaning anymore in his life. And then on his last journey out, he saw a mendicant, a kind of a sadhu type, right? A mendicant, a homeless one, And in Nepal, India at that time, there were, religious people who kind of renounced the world and just, wandered about, right? Without food, they begged, And he saw this man walking through the market, and the man had a deep serenity to him. Walked with great dignity, calmness, had serenity to him. And he asked Chandra, who's that? And Chandra said, well, that's a hermit. That's a renunciant. He's someone who's given up worldly life. He just carries his robes, he begs for his food, he sleeps where he sleeps. And to this the Buddha was, again, dumbfounded. Because here was a man who had none of the worldly things that he thought gave life meaning, right? And yet he seemed happy and serene. And so it was this experience that awoke within him, right? That which had been, which he had forgotten. You see, that which he had forgotten. And it was very clear because of I think the way it was. He did not see that he could remain at home. Because to remain at home would be to be, the heir to the throne and all this. And he wanted what that hermit had. Because he thought, you needed the wealth and the power and the body and the success and all that good stuff to be happy. And when he saw that somebody was happy with nothing, I want some of that. It's sort of like that. And that's what brought him to leave everything he had known. I'm sure it was not easy. He loved his father, he loved his mother, he loved his community, he loved his wife and child. But, something very powerful had awakened in him. His desire to really, to understand not only what is the nature of suffering, but, what is it that transcends suffering? Right? What is it that allows somebody to exist in this world, with everyone, and yet be at calm, yet radiate calmness and peacefulness and happiness, right? And so, this was his journey. And I think, again, even though we can see this kind of as a legendary thing, I think the way I'm presenting it can speak to all of us, because I think the Buddha's experience is very human. All of us, whether we're in ourselves or in families, communities, we are surrounded by what? Sickness and old age and death. Anybody know anybody who's gotten sick this year? Anybody been sick this year? Anybody know anybody who's been really sick this year? Seriously sick this year? Anybody know anybody who's died this year? Right? Yeah. So it's happening all the time, but we don't see the implications. Right? We don't see the implications. Now again, the Buddha's teaching, his teachings, he taught differently for monastics, sadhus, not sadhus, bhikkhus and bhikshunis, people who became monks and nuns and left the world, monks and nuns. But he also taught many lay people. He taught for nearly 50 years, wandering about in the villages. He taught very differently. And I think people like us, lay people, we get confused because we read teachings that the Buddha gave to monks and nuns who renunciate, and we go, wow, that's too much for me, you see. But if you read his teachings that he gave to lay people, they were very different because they spoke to our life. Because the path of the sadhu, the path of the renunciate, the path of the monk or nun is the path of detachment. Detachment means, right? Detach, right? Worldly life, detach. Hair, cut it off. Clothes, only wear one robe, right? Home, family, relationships, don't have them. Live communally. So their way is detachment, renunciation. The lay person, and we're all lay people, is the path of, he taught, non-attachment, right? Because we live in the world of things. Anybody notice that? We live in the world of relationships, right? We live, we can't walk around naked. Can we? No. We can't cover our bodies with ash and walk around. I don't think we'd hold on to our job too long. Sort of that way. Right. So we live in this world of things, of gain and loss, of relationships, of careers, of homes, of having hair that we have to comb, right? The question is, the teaching is, for lay people, is how to live in this world, but not be attached. But not to be detached. I mean, we do have to do the dishes. We do have to drive our kids to school. We're not detached, right? We do have to take care of our friends and family. But we do it with a gentle attachment, which is not attachment. It's soft. It's not like this. And that's not easy. See, in a certain way, detachment is easy. Oh, I get it. I'm sick of my hair. Just no hair. Problem solved. Sick of clothes. I just want to wear clothes. You know what I mean? It's like, but we have a constant problem. You see, so to be able to be in the world, the phrase I always like is to be in the world but not of the world. Right? We're lay people. We're in the world. Right? Families, relationships, work, savings accounts. You know what I mean? That's our world. But we're not of it. Because we understand there's a deeper way to live. Right? And that's what spirituality, real religion gives us. That's what meditation gives us. It gives us another way to be. So we can be in the world of things, be in the world of sickness, old age, and death, and be okay. So, so we honor the Buddhas. We are only here because of Siddhartha's decision 2,600 years ago to leave his palace in Kapilavastu, right? And to wander off and spend 6 years searching, meeting all the great swamis and teachers of his age, not feeling like they satisfied his spiritual yearning. Went to Bodh Gaya, came to his great enlightenment. And fortunately, he taught for 50 years. And it wasn't like he just stayed in one place teaching. I mean, that's what I mean. He wandered about, constantly moving about, and people would gather, and he would just respond to them. They'd ask him questions, he'd respond. All kinds of people, monks and nuns, laymen, lay people, they'd ask him questions. And because he had a very large community around him of very intelligent people, thousands of disciples, over 50 years, they remembered his talks. They actually got councils together after his passing to really categorize what he had taught. And so we are very fortunate that there is a very substantial record of his authentic teachings from 2,600 years ago, but we even as fortunate, not only that we had his original teaching, but for 2,600 years, very bright, intelligent, insightful men and women have devoted their life to this practice, have come to their own awakening, and so the 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 fruits are still being nurtured. The waters are still being nurtured. And, we're fortunate in our times that we still have great Buddhist teachers around, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, like Thich Nhat Hanh, other many, many, many teachers who are doing the same thing, who are sharing the Buddhist teaching in a modern way, right? So we can speak to people like us, living our life. So we honor today the Buddha's birth. Again, we take out this image of him once a year. It's above the heavens and below the heavens. And when the kids come in, we'll it's traditional to pour kind of scented tea over the Buddha. It's got an honorific thing, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We're bathing the baby Buddha, right? So why do we bathe? To get clean. Okay, baby Buddha doesn't need to be clean. So what we're doing is, as you're bathing the baby Buddha, in your mind you're saying, you're making the aspiration to bathe your mind of all its impurities. That's what we're doing. Because the baby Buddha is, we all have a baby Buddha within us. We all have a baby Buddha within us. Right? It still is pure as ever. But because of our wrong thinking, wrong ideas, etc., afflictive mind states, it's gotten a little contaminated, a little dirty. So please imagine as you're washing it, you're washing all those contaminants away, and you want to return to your natural state of openness and ease and goodness, love, compassion, understanding. And usually at moments like this, we recommit ourselves. And again, I understand many people here may not be Buddhist, doesn't matter. Whatever your spiritual aspiration is, personal aspiration, it's always good to use these times to recommit yourself to your own spiritual evolution, and acknowledge. We forget that we were babies. Do you realize everybody in this room, and Brent, how many people do we have online today?
106.
And about 100 people online, so all of us, we were all babies. Did you know that? And when we were babies, none of us had any language. None of us had a thought. Our minds were very pure. Simple. Right? And over the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, maybe even 80 years, we've gotten a little contaminated. So we want to clean it today. Okay. So, are there any questions? We have about a few minutes. The kids are coming in a few minutes. Any questions about anything that was said today? Any comments? Anybody want to share anything while we wait for the kids? This is the day of the Buddha's birth. This week.
I always love to hear the story of when the Buddha first went out into the city and saw all kinds of different people that he hadn't seen. And it always reminds me of my middle child when he was, I think he was 2, but he may have been 3. And we were at my grandmother's house for her 90th birthday. And he was standing in the mirror. She had a big mirrored wall in her living room, and she was standing right behind him. And he made some comment on how she walked. She kind of moved with a little shuffle, and she said, "Well, when you're 90, you'd be lucky to walk with a little shuffle too." And he looked at her in the mirror and he said, "What? I'm going to be 90?" And he started crying so significantly that it took about an hour or two to console him.
Wow.
And I think at that moment I realized that I was going to be 90. Hopefully, right?
Yeah.
So I that story just always brings me back to that moment of when my 3-year-old realized he was going to be 90, and I realized that one day, hopefully, I would be 90.
No, that's wonderful. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we live in a dream, my friends, don't we? Even though sickness, old age, and death is happening all around us, people are exiting this stage all the time. Yet, we live in this fantasy that this is just going to go on. Now, again, it doesn't mean you become morbid. No. Actually, in our tradition, thinking about impermanence and all this enlivens us, right? It says, wow, life is precious. I don't know when it's going to change. I don't know what I'm going to die. I don't know how long my health is going to last. Yeah, my life, this moment, my relationships that I have right now, these are precious. I should take care of them, right? So, but yeah, contemplating impermanence is a wake-up call. I mean, like it was to Siddhartha, it was a wake-up call. He wasn't ready for it. Other comments? Yes, ma'am. Wait.
Is there any documentation that Buddha's wife and kid knew that he was going to leave, and did he ever come back and check in with them from time to time?
Spoken like a good American, you know. Hey, what happened to the wife and the kid? Yeah. So actually, it is well documented that after, he basically, it's all legendary, that he did slip away because he knew they wouldn't let him go. You know what I mean? He just knew they wouldn't let him go, so he did slip away. But he sent word back with his charioteer, that after his great enlightenment and after his spiritual search, when he found out he would come back, and he did come back to Kapilavastu, his home capital, and he did reconcile with his. Oh, by the way, his mother died a week after he passed. His mother died a week after he was born. Do you know why? All mothers, you could understand this. All mothers of Buddhas to be die very soon after giving birth, because if they kind of raised them and really loved them and developed all their motherly instinct, it would break her heart when he left the palace. So to save her for that, she died. And she was taken to a special heaven where she's enjoying herself. Saw all the good things her son was doing, so she could be proud of him. Yeah, but he came back. His son, Rahula, became a monastic and served under him. And he was raised by his mother's sister, Prajapati. It was traditional in those times, so she became his mother, and she was actually the first Buddhist nun. Yeah, when the Buddha was starting to ordain, he was ordaining monks. He wasn't ordaining women, because to ordain a woman in those days was a big deal. People in Nepal could probably understand this, because women were the property of who? What? And before their husbands, they were the property of who? their fathers. So they were not free like men. You see, like men could, decide to be monks. But for a woman to decide, would go against all social custom, be a problem. And so the Buddha was very reluctant to, to ordain women. So the women were very smart, because one of the women was his stepmother, the woman who raised him, that he was very close to. So they asked her to go to him and make a special entreaty. And so he did ordain her and many others. And that the order of bhikshunis, of ordained nuns, begins with his stepmother. Yeah. Does that make you feel better? Yeah, he reconciled with the family, took care of the son. They all lived happily ever after. I think the father had other sons too, who took over the kingdom. I don't know if it lasted that long, the Shakyas, Shakya kingdom. Any other comments?
We have some online.
Yes, online.
Bruce asks, why do you suppose the Buddha had not been exposed to old people before he left the palace?
I can only guess that his father made sure that I mean, it is a legend, and I wasn't there. But I mean, when it comes to legend and myth, you can't think too logically, right? But but it's so obvious. I mean, sounds very pedestrian, but in the St. Pete Times, they have these pictures of these like $25-50 million houses. I don't know if you ever see these things. There was one in the paper. I mean, it like had 30 bedrooms. I mean, it was just incredible. Its own horse stable, its own movie theater, its own bowling alley, its own pool, its own spa, its own, right? What are they trying to do? I mean, it takes so much for people to be happy. Are they really any happier? Are people in places like that any happier than us in our little homes? You know what I mean? It's like, so you see that worldly mind that's really fundamentally not happy and only thinks it'll be happier if it has bigger and more and more and more. And I looked at that place and went, it doesn't end. Do you know what I mean? It's still today. People thinking that things will make them happy. More things, bigger things, grander things. The world hasn't changed much from the Buddha's time. That's why we're still sharing the teachings 2,600 years later. So the kids are going to be coming in, and they'll be lining up with their families, and they'll be coming down and bathing the baby Buddhas, and then the rest of us will get in behind, and then there is a reception afterwards, special Buddha's birthday pizza. Yeah. Before the Buddha left the palace, it was one of his favorite foods when he was he always loved pizza. So that's in honor of the Buddha, the adolescent Buddha. We're having pizza, and then we have special cupcakes, Buddha's birthday cupcakes. Okay. And I think the kids have been doing their own little projects, so they may be sharing what they've been up to. Come on over here, kids. I guess, yeah, come on, you're all going to line up. Everybody's on their best behavior, right?
Okay, hi everybody. This is the family program,
And work.
part of the family program. We still have more coming. A lot of kids and middle schoolers today.
Maybe everybody can move down a little bit. Gonna move that way. Yeah, just keep moving. Good.
All right. So we had a nice family program today and lots of children, and they made decorations for the celebration today. So thank you, children, for making it more beautiful in here. And I think we have a couple kids. We had an older group and a younger group. And so we have Nia. She's going to help tell us, or tell the grown-ups what we did today. Can you say one thing we did in our program today?
We made lanterns. This is how they look like. And yeah.
Did you hear a story?
We also heard a story about the Buddha, about the Bodhi tree.
Thank you. And then we have our middle schoolers. You just say your name.
Kevin. So when first we went outside to do some light movement and learn how we can infuse our mind with our body, and then we learned stuff about the Buddha, like how to concentrate your mind on one subject, and we also said Om a lot, and then we did breathing exercises, and then we made lanterns.
Was there one other person who wanted to share? Was there? Okay, I think we have it covered. Thank you, children. So I think now you can join your families.
Should we put the lanterns on the string?
Oh, okay.
Wait, who wants to keep their lantern and who wants to use it as pretty decoration? Raise your hand if you want to put it on the string and then we can have it up there.
I think some of the older children are willing to part with their lanterns. Yeah. I think a lot of our younger children are wanting to bring them home, I think. All right. You're dedicated. Okay, so go over. All right. Okay, and once you've either donated your lantern or if you're holding on to it, you can sit with your family. Where's your dad? You holding on to your lantern? Where's your dad? Did you find your dad? Oh, there's your mom. Yeah, go to your mom. Okay? Yeah. Where's your dad? Oh, there's them right there. They're so cute. Mm-hmm. All right.
So if all the parents who came with their children would like to come down the middle aisle and line up through here, all the parents with their children, whether they're young children, middle children, older, all line up in the middle here. Fred, are you going to give instructions how to bathe the Buddha? Yeah? Yeah, how to bathe the Buddha?
Okay, just very quickly, the other people know, but so traditionally what we're going to do is bathe the baby Buddha, right? And traditionally 1, 2, 3. Okay, now that's what you're doing with your body, but you know what you're doing with your mind? That's the most important thing. You're saying to yourself, I am cleaning my mind so my own baby Buddha can come out. Okay, everybody has a baby Buddha. All right, so you're good. So cleaning your mind of all the things that get into your way to be a kind, caring person in this world, right? You got it? All right, good. So begin, so we come up. Come. And you can come 2 at a time, because there are 2 ladles. You just make 2 ladles and you just bathe. Get some tea and just pour it over. That's perfect. And you just make your little prayer inside your mind. Perfect. 3. Good, thank you. Okay, come on.
After you bathe the baby Buddha, you can go out the side and go into the garden for a pizza. It will be here in about 10 minutes.
Is that the official t-shirt?
Saranam gacchami.
Yeah, we have to keep. Come.
Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami.
You can bring it back.
Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami.